Hey guys, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, thanks. And also let me know where y'all are watching from and at what time. I'm curious. The wind howled like a living beast, its icy breath tearing through the dense forest. Snow fell in a relentless torrent, blanketing the world in white and obscuring every trail. William's legs burned with every step as he trudged through knee-deep drifts, his rifle slung over one shoulder and his pack weighing heavy on his back. He cursed the storm under his breath. This wasn't the wilderness he was used to. This was chaos, nature's fury unleashed. He almost didn't see the cabin. It loomed out of the blizzard like a mirage, its dark angular frame a sharp contrast against the blinding snow. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, a promise of warmth and shelter. Relief flooded William's chest as he stumbled toward the door, boots crunching over the icy ground. He didn't bother knocking. This was survival, not politeness. Inside, the warmth hit him like a physical force. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the log walls. The cabin smelled of damp wood and unwashed clothes, and the air was heavy with tension. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward him as he entered, their owners frozen mid-conversation. Strangers. "Who the hell are you?" a burly man in a flannel jacket demanded. His voice was gruff, his expression guarded. "Just a hunter," William replied, shaking snow from his coat. "Blizzard caught me out there. Needed somewhere to ride it out." The man didn't lower his guard, but a woman sitting near the fire spoke up. "Let him stay, Gus. The storm's bad enough without tossing someone back into it." Gus grunted but didn't argue. The others introduced themselves. There was Rachel, the reserved hiker who had insisted he stay. Gus, the chatty truck driver. Sam, a grizzled old hermit who spoke in cryptic riddles. And Kyle, a young camper who looked like he didn't belong so far from civilization. The introductions were brief and awkward. Nobody seemed thrilled about the growing crowd, but the blizzard offered no alternative. William found a spot near the fire, his rifle resting within arm's reach. He had learned long ago never to let his guard down in unfamiliar places, especially with unfamiliar people. As the night wore on, the storm outside only grew fiercer. The windows rattled in their frames, and the wind's mournful wails seeped through the cracks in the walls. The group tried to make small talk, but the unease in the room was palpable. William watched the others closely, his instincts sharp. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him, though he couldn't put his finger on it. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "This storm's not natural," she muttered, staring into the fire. "It feels wrong." Nobody responded, but William noticed the others shift uncomfortably. He gripped his rifle a little tighter. As the firelight flickered and the shadows danced, the storm raged on, and outside, somewhere in the swirling snow, unseen eyes watched the cabin. The hours dragged on, the storm showing no signs of letting up. The fire crackled and popped, its warmth doing little to thaw the chill that had settled in the room. William kept his hands close to the flames, watching the others through hooded eyes. They were an odd group, strangers thrust together by nature's fury, each keeping their own secrets. Gus broke the silence first, pulling a flask from his coat and taking a long swig. "Hell of a night to be stuck in the middle of nowhere," he muttered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "You all just happened to be wandering around out here too, huh?" "I was hiking the back trails," Rachel said, her voice even. "Didn't expect the weather to turn so quickly." Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I was camping a few miles from here. The snow came out of nowhere. I barely made it this far." Sam, the hermit, chuckled softly. "Storms like this don't come out of nowhere," he said, his voice gravelly and low. "They come when the moon calls them." The group fell silent. Gus snorted. "The hell are you talking about, old man?" Sam leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the firelight. "Full moon tonight," he said, his tone almost conspiratorial. "And these woods, they've seen things that don't care much for people." William felt a flicker of irritation at the hermit's theatrics. He wasn't one for ghost stories, especially not now. "You think something out there's causing this?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with skepticism. Sam shrugged. Not think, no. The others exchanged uneasy glances. Kyle looked like he wanted to ask more but thought better of it. Rachel stared into the fire, her face unreadable. Gus just shook his head and took another drink. William stood and moved to the window, peering out into the storm. The snow was so thick it was impossible to see more than a few feet. Still, he felt the weight of the storm pressing down on the cabin, as though it wasn't just nature at work, but something more. His breath fogged the glass as he muttered to himself, "Stories don't kill people. Wolves do." "You hunt often?" Rachel asked, breaking into his thoughts. "Enough," William replied, turning back to the room. "You get used to tracking things, staying sharp. Out here, it's the only way to stay alive." "You think something's tracking us?" Kyle's voice wavered, his nervousness almost palpable. William hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet, but you don't want to be caught unprepared if it is." The room grew quiet again, the weight of his words settling over the group. Gus finally set his flask down, muttering about keeping watch. The others murmured their agreement, though no one seemed eager to volunteer. William settled back into his chair, his rifle resting across his lap. Outside, the wind screamed and the storm clawed at the walls. Whatever was out there, storm or beast, he knew they weren't safe. Not yet. The cabin settled into uneasy silence as the storm raged outside, its howls an ever-present reminder of their isolation. The group had divided the night into watches, though nobody seemed eager to take the first shift. Kyle volunteered, his nerves evident as he pulled on his coat and muttered something about getting more firewood. "I won't go far," he said, opening the door just wide enough to slip outside. A gust of icy wind swept in, chilling the cabin instantly. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the rest of them alone in the flickering firelight. William watched the door for a long moment, his rifle resting across his lap. Something about the boy's jittery demeanor gnawed at him, though he couldn't say why. He leaned back in his chair, forcing himself to relax, but his instincts wouldn't let him rest. He'd spent years honing his sense for danger, and now every nerve in his body was telling him to stay alert. Minutes ticked by. The fire popped and the wind howled. Kyle didn't return. "How long's he been out there?" Rachel asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed her unease. "Too long," William said, standing. He moved to the door, grabbing his coat on the way. "I'll check on him." Gus rose, his hand resting on the axe he'd set by the hearth. "I'll go with you." "No need," William replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Stay here and keep the fire going." Gus scowled but sat back down. William opened the door, stepping out into the storm. The cold hit him like a wall, the wind biting through his coat as he pulled it tighter. Snow swirled around him, reducing visibility to just a few feet. He called out, "Kyle!" No answer. William followed the faint trail of footprints leading away from the cabin, his rifle at the ready. The snow had already begun to fill them in, and he had to hurry before the storm erased them entirely. The prints led toward the edge of the tree line, then stopped abruptly. Something wasn't right. William scanned the area, his sharp eyes picking out faint signs in the snow. A disturbance, a struggle, blood. His stomach tightened as he followed the red-streaked snow to a shallow drift. Kyle's body lay half-buried, his face frozen in a mask of terror. His coat was shredded, deep gashes tearing through the fabric and flesh beneath. The snow around him was soaked crimson. William crouched, his hunter's instincts taking over as he examined the scene. The wounds were unlike anything he'd seen from a wolf or bear. The claw marks were too deep, too precise. And the teeth marks, they were enormous. He rose, his rifle gripped tightly. The storm seemed to close in around him, the wind carrying faint echoes he couldn't place. He took one last look at Kyle's lifeless body before turning back toward the cabin. Inside, the others waited, their faces pale as William stepped through the door. "He's dead," William said, his voice cold. "Something out there killed him." The cabin was silent as William's words hung in the air. The fire's crackle was the only sound, an eerie contrast to the storm's ferocity outside. Gus stood, his face pale but his voice loud and sharp. "What the hell do you mean something killed him? What did you see?" William removed his coat and set his rifle back across his lap. Claw marks, deep ones bigger than any animal I've seen around here. Teeth, too, large enough to tear through bone like it was nothing. Rachel gasped, her hands clasping tightly together. "Are you saying it was a bear?" William shook his head. "Not a bear. Bears don't kill like this. They maul, they rip. This was precise, deliberate." Sam leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "I told you," he said, his voice gravelly. "The moon calls things out here, things that ain't natural." "Not this again," Gus snapped, his fists clenched. "You don't know that. It could have been a pack of wolves. They get desperate in storms like this." "I didn't see wolf tracks," William said evenly. "Whatever it was, it's big, strong, and it's close." The room fell into uneasy silence again. Rachel finally spoke, her voice trembling. "What do we do? We can't just stay here and wait for it to come after us." William straightened, his tone steady and commanding. "We barricade the cabin, make it harder for anything to get in. Gus, take that axe and fortify the door. Rachel, gather anything we can use to cover the windows. Sam, keep the fire going. We'll need the light." "What about you?" Rachel asked. "I'll keep watch," William said, his voice firm. "If it comes back, I'll deal with it." The group moved to work, though tension was thick in the air. Gus hammered boards across the doorframe with muttered curses, while Rachel stacked furniture against the windows. Sam threw more wood onto the fire, his movements slow but deliberate. William positioned himself near the main window, his rifle resting on the sill. He could feel the weight of the storm pressing against the cabin, the snow piling higher by the minute. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the glass, searching for any sign of movement. Hours passed. The fire burned low and exhaustion began to creep in. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and neither did the oppressive sense of being watched. Every gust of wind felt like a prelude to something worse. Rachel sat down near the fire, her face pale and drawn. "Do you think it's still out there?" William didn't answer immediately. His hunter's instincts told him it was. Predators didn't kill for the sake of it. They killed to eat or to eliminate threats. Whatever had taken Kyle wasn't finished. He could feel it, the same way he could feel a storm coming long before it arrived. "It's out there," William said finally, his voice low. "And it's watching us." As if on cue, the wind howled louder, rattling the cabin walls. The sound seemed almost alive, filled with malice. William tightened his grip on his rifle. Whatever was out there, it wasn't going to stop, and neither was he. The tension inside the cabin grew heavier with every passing moment. The storm outside howled with unrelenting fury, and even the fire's warmth seemed to falter under the weight of the fear gripping the group. They spoke little, their nerves too raw for conversation. Each creak of the cabin's wooden frame made them flinch. Gus leaned back against the barricaded door, his axe resting against his leg. "We can't just sit here all night," he muttered, his voice breaking the uneasy silence. "That thing's out there, and we don't even know what it is." "We don't need to know what it is," William replied, his voice calm but firm. "We just need to survive until morning." "And what if it gets in before then?" Gus shot back, his tone sharp. "It won't," William said, gripping his rifle tightly. "Not if we stay vigilant." Despite William's words, the unease in the room was palpable. Rachel sat close to the fire, her knees drawn up to her chest. Sam was perched on a stool, his eyes closed, muttering something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. Gus shifted restlessly, his irritation mounting. "I'll take the next watch," Gus announced suddenly, standing and grabbing his axe. "Might as well make myself useful." William gave him a long look, then nodded. "Fine. Stay inside the cabin. Keep an eye on the windows and doors. If you see or hear anything, wake us immediately." Gus nodded and took his position near the front window, the axe resting on his lap. The rest of the group settled into uneasy rest, though no one seemed able to fully relax. William leaned back in his chair, his rifle resting across his knees, his eyes never fully closing. The hours dragged on. The wind screamed, rattling the cabin walls, and the fire flickered weakly, casting shifting shadows across the room. Rachel eventually dozed off near the hearth, her breathing shallow and uneasy. Sam remained motionless, his muttering tapering off into silence. When William opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was the empty chair by the window. Gus was gone. "Gus?" William called out, his voice sharp. The sound startled Rachel awake, and she sat up, her eyes wide with fear. "He was there a moment ago," she whispered, glancing toward the window. "I swear he was." William was already on his feet, his rifle in hand. The cabin's interior felt suddenly smaller, the shadows deeper. He moved to the window and peered out, but the snow was too thick to see anything beyond a few feet. The storm roared on, drowning out any sound that might have given away Gus's whereabouts. "Stay here," William ordered, his voice low but commanding. "Don't move unless I tell you." He stepped carefully through the cabin, checking every corner, every shadow. His boots creaked against the wooden floor, the sound unnervingly loud in the oppressive silence. He found no sign of Gus, only his axe, abandoned near the back door. The door was ajar, snow blowing in through the narrow gap. William's stomach tightened as he approached it, his rifle raised. The snow outside was disturbed, faint tracks leading away from the cabin and into the storm. Rachel appeared behind him, her voice trembling. "Do you think it got him?" William didn't answer immediately. His hunter's instincts were screaming at him, warning him that something was wrong, something more than the storm, more than the tracks in the snow. "I don't know," he said finally, his voice grim, "but I intend to find out." William stared into the swirling snow outside the cabin, his mind racing. The storm obscured everything beyond a few feet, and the tracks leading away from the cabin were already beginning to vanish under the relentless snowfall. Gus's disappearance left a knot of tension in William's chest. Something was out there, something intelligent, patient, and deadly. Rachel hovered behind him, her fear palpable. "You're not thinking of going out there, are you?" William shook his head, shutting the door and locking it tight. "Not in this storm. It'd be suicide. Whatever took Gus, it'll come back." Rachel shivered, though whether from fear or the cold, William couldn't tell. She returned to the fire, stoking it to chase away the chill creeping into the cabin. Sam remained in his corner, his lips moving silently in prayer, his eyes fixed on the floor. William resumed his position near the window, his rifle resting on the sill. The storm outside was an unrelenting wall of white, but he forced himself to focus, scanning for any movement. His hunter's instincts were on high alert, every sense sharpened by years of tracking dangerous prey. Hours crawled by. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. The wind howled, its mournful wail almost sounding like a voice. William ignored it, his eyes never leaving the window. Then, out of the corner of his vision, he saw it. A pair of glowing eyes. They hovered just beyond the edge of visibility, large and unblinking, reflecting the faint light from the cabin. William froze, his breath catching in his throat. The eyes didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, locked onto the cabin with an unnatural intensity. "Rachel," he whispered, his voice barely audible. She looked up, her face pale in the firelight. "Get behind me, now." She obeyed without question, creeping closer to the wall as William adjusted his grip on the rifle. He sighted down the barrel, his heart pounding in his chest. The eyes were still there, watching, and then they moved. The figure shifted, stepping closer to the cabin, its shape emerging faintly from the storm. It was massive, its hulking frame distorted by the falling snow. William could make out the faintest hints of fur and the glint of sharp teeth as the thing crept closer, its movements slow and deliberate. William didn't wait. He fired, the rifle's crack shattering the silence and reverberating through the cabin. The flash from the muzzle lit up the room, and Rachel let out a stifled scream. When William lowered the rifle, the eyes were gone. "Did you get it?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "I don't think so," William said, his tone grim. "It moved before I fired. He kept his rifle trained on the window, his body tense and ready. The storm outside raged on, and the cabin walls seemed to press in closer. Whatever was out there was smart, cunning, and it wasn't finished with them yet. "Stay close to the fire," he told Rachel, "and keep your eyes open." Rachel nodded, her expression one of barely contained terror. William stayed by the window, his grip on the rifle tight, his gaze fixed on the storm. He knew this wasn't over, far from it. The cabin felt smaller with each passing hour, its warmth suffocating under the weight of fear. The glowing eyes were gone, but their presence lingered like a shadow over everyone inside. The storm outside roared, relentless and unyielding, as if the world itself were trying to bury them. Rachel huddled near the fire, her knees drawn to her chest. Sam remained in his corner, staring blankly at the floorboards, his prayers having tapered into an unsettling silence. William stayed near the window, his rifle at the ready, scanning the storm for any sign of movement. The silence inside was broken by a creak, a sound too deliberate to be the storm. William turned sharply, his eyes darting toward the back of the cabin. "What was that?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. William held up a hand to silence her. He moved slowly toward the sound, his boots barely making a noise on the wooden floor. The firelight flickered, casting jagged shadows as he approached the corner where Sam sat. "Sam," William said quietly. The old man didn't respond. William's grip tightened on his rifle as he stepped closer. Sam's head was bowed, his long, stringy hair obscuring his face. His shoulders rose and fell in shallow, rhythmic breaths. "Sam," William repeated, louder this time. The old man finally looked up, and William froze. Sam's face was pale, almost waxy, his eyes wide and unfocused. His lips trembled as he whispered, "It's here." Before William could respond, a loud crash came from the roof, followed by the sound of scraping claws. Rachel screamed, jumping to her feet. William spun, his rifle aimed at the ceiling. "Get to the center of the room," William barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Rachel obeyed, but Sam didn't move. He stared at the ceiling, his lips moving in silent prayer, as the sounds above grew louder. Something heavy shifted across the roof, its weight causing the rafters to groan. William kept his rifle trained upward, his heart pounding in his chest. The scraping stopped suddenly, replaced by silence so profound it seemed to press against his ears. He held his breath, his finger hovering over the trigger. Then the back door slammed open. Snow and wind burst into the cabin, extinguishing the fire and plunging the room into near darkness. Rachel screamed again, scrambling toward William as he turned to face the open doorway. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he could just make out the shape of something retreating into the storm. "Close the door," William shouted. Rachel moved to obey, but her trembling hands fumbled with the latch. William rushed over, slamming the door shut and securing it with a heavy wooden bar. The howling wind outside seemed louder now, more insistent. Sam's voice broke the tense silence. "It's toying with us," he said, his tone flat. "It knows we're afraid." William didn't respond. His mind was racing, calculating their next move. Whatever was out there wasn't just an animal. It was something far worse, and it was hunting them. "We're not leaving this cabin," William said, his voice resolute. "Not until the storm passes, and if it comes back, we'll be ready." But deep down, he wasn't sure they would be. The cabin was plunged into tense silence once more, save for the howling storm outside and the faint groan of the roof beam straining under the weight of snow. William stood near the door, his rifle at the ready, his eyes scanning the shadows. The fire had died, leaving only faint embers, and the cold crept into the room like a predator of its own. Rachel huddled in the center of the cabin, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Sam remained by the wall, his muttering growing louder, more frantic. His words were incoherent, a mix of prayer and gibberish that only heightened the oppressive atmosphere. William's voice cut through the tension. "We need light." He gestured toward the fireplace. "Rachel, see if you can get it going again." Rachel nodded shakily and moved to the hearth, fumbling with the logs and embers. Her hands trembled as she worked, and William couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He was their only defense, their only chance of survival. The scratching returned. This time it came from the walls. Long, deliberate scrapes that sent chills racing down William's spine. He spun toward the sound, his rifle raised. The noise moved, circling the cabin, a predator testing its prey. Rachel froze, her eyes wide with terror as the scratching grew louder. "It's trying to get in," she whispered, barely audible. William moved toward the sound, his boots creaking against the wooden floor. He followed the noise, his rifle trained on the walls, ready to fire at the first sign of movement. His senses were razor-sharp, his hunter's instincts screaming that danger was imminent. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. Then Sam laughed. It was a low, guttural sound, completely out of place and utterly unnerving. William turned to find the old man staring at him, his lips curled into a twisted grin. "What's so funny?" William asked, his voice cold and steady. Sam's laughter faded, and he shook his head. "You don't see it, do you? You don't know what you are." William frowned, his grip tightening on his rifle. "What are you talking about?" Sam didn't answer. Instead, his eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward, his body limp. Rachel gasped, rushing toward him, but William stopped her with a sharp motion. "Stay back," he ordered. Before he could inspect Sam, the door exploded inward. Snow and wind roared into the cabin, and with it came the creature. It was massive, its hulking frame filling the doorway. Its fur was matted with blood and snow, its glowing eyes locked onto William with an intelligence that sent a shiver through him. Its jaws were lined with jagged teeth, its claws glinting in the dim light. William didn't hesitate. He fired, the crack of the rifle deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet struck the creature's shoulder, and it let out a guttural roar, recoiling but not retreating. It lunged forward, its claws swiping through the air. William dove to the side, rolling to his feet and firing again. The second shot hit its chest, but the beast barely flinched. It turned its attention to Rachel, who was frozen in terror near the hearth. "No!" William shouted, drawing his sidearm. He fired rapidly, the gunshots echoing like thunder, driving the creature back toward the doorway. It snarled, its glowing eyes narrowing before it retreated into the storm once more. The door slammed shut behind it, leaving the cabin eerily silent. Rachel collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. William stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving, his rifle still trained on the door. The creature was gone, for now, but William knew it would return. The cabin felt hollow in the aftermath of the attack. Snow swirled through the open door before Rachel, trembling and pale, managed to close and latch it. She slumped against the frame, her breaths shallow and ragged. The fire had died completely, leaving the room dimly lit by the faint glow of the storm seeping through cracks in the walls. William stood motionless, his rifle still trained on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He replayed the encounter in his mind, every movement, every detail of the creature. His shots had landed true, but the beast's resilience was unnatural, its intelligence unsettling. Rachel's sobs broke the silence. "We're going to die here," she whispered, her voice cracked and uneven. "No, we're not," William said firmly, though the doubt clawed at him. "We just need to hold out until morning." Sam's lifeless form caught William's attention. The old man hadn't moved since his strange outburst. William crouched beside him, shaking his shoulder gently. "Sam?" No response. The old man's skin was cold, his breathing shallow. William pulled back his collar and froze. There on Sam's neck were deep, jagged claw marks, hidden beneath layers of grime and old clothing. Blood seeped from the fresh wounds, staining his shirt. "He's been marked," William said grimly, standing and turning to Rachel. "It must have happened when the creature came through the door." Rachel's wide eyes locked on the old man. "Is he infected? Can he turn into one of those things?" "I don't know," William admitted, "but we can't risk it." Sam stirred then, his eyes fluttering open. "You don't understand," he croaked, his voice barely audible. "It's not me you should fear." "What are you talking about?" William demanded, leaning closer. "What do you know?" Sam's lips trembled, his breath shallow. The storm, the beast, it's drawn to one of us. William narrowed his eyes. What do you mean, one of us? You, Sam whispered, his gaze locking onto William's. You brought it here. The words hit William like a blow. He recoiled, staring at the old man as Rachel's fearful gaze turned to him. That's impossible, William said, his voice firm. I've been tracking it, fighting it. I'm not. His voice trailed off as fragments of memory surfaced, the missing time between watches, the brief blackouts he'd attributed to exhaustion, the strange primal connection he felt to the beast. His stomach turned as the truth clawed its way into his consciousness. No, William whispered, his grip tightening on his rifle. That's not possible. Sam gave a weak laugh, his head lolling to the side. You'll see. When the moon is at its highest, you'll see. Rachel stepped back, her hands trembling as she reached for the fire poker. William, is it true? Are you one of them? I don't know, William said, his voice barely audible, but deep down he feared he did. The silence in the cabin was deafening, broken only by the howling wind outside. William stood frozen, his rifle hanging loosely in his hands. Rachel kept her distance, clutching the fire poker like a lifeline. Her eyes darted between William and Sam's lifeless form, her terror barely contained. I don't remember, William said, his voice low and uneven. I've been blacking out. It doesn't make sense. Rachel took a step back, her knuckles white against the iron poker. It makes too much sense, William. You're connected to it, aren't you? That's why it keeps coming back. He wanted to deny it, to argue, but the pieces were falling into place, fitting together in ways he couldn't ignore. He had been bitten sometime during his hunt. Lost and dazed, he had wandered into the cabin, bringing the beast with him. Now, as the full moon blazed in the sky, he could feel its loud hum. He was going to turn into that thing, the blackouts. Had he killed Gus? He turned away from Rachel, his heart pounding. I didn't know, William murmured, his voice barely audible. I swear, I didn't know. Rachel's voice wavered. What happens now? William didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he moved to the cabin's small desk, where a stack of yellowed paper sat beside a worn fountain pen. He dropped into the creaking chair and began to write, his hands trembling as he put the night into words. Each sentence was a confession, a chronicle of his growing realization. I came here as a hunter. I thought I was tracking a beast. I thought I was protecting the others. I was wrong. He glanced at Rachel, who watched him warily from the far side of the room. She didn't look at him like a person anymore. The beast isn't just stalking us. It's a part of me. I can feel it now, stirring beneath my skin, waiting for the moon to call it forward. I thought I was the solution. I've been the problem all along. His pen hesitated as the storm outside seemed to wail louder, almost celebratory. He could feel the pull of the moon now, a magnetic force that made his blood boil and his senses sharpen. His reflection in the frost-coated window caught his eye. His pupils were too wide, his teeth too sharp. I need you to leave, William said suddenly, his voice startling Rachel. What? She stammered, gripping the poker tighter. Take whatever you can carry. Get out of here. I'll stay. I'll keep it here. He looked up at her, his expression filled with a mix of determination and guilt. It's the only way you'll survive. Rachel hesitated, then moved toward the door, her movements quick but cautious. She paused, her hand on the latch, and looked back at him. What will you do? William glanced at the journal. I'll finish this. Someone needs to know what happened here. She didn't say anything else. The door opened and the storm swallowed her. William hoped she would survive. William returned to the journal, his hand steady now as he wrote his final words. If you find this, know that I stayed. Know that I fought, but also know that when the moon rises, this cabin and this whole area is not safe. You might run into something like me. As the moonlight broke through the cracks in the walls, William set the pen down. His body began to tremble, the transformation starting. He closed his eyes and let the beast take over. The next morning, the cabin was empty, the snow stained with blood. And on the desk, the journal remained, waiting for the next traveler to find it.